Whether it's business or pleasure, there's lots to do before you travel. Your checklist is even longer when you head overseas. Do you have your passport? Maybe you need a visa. How about some foreign currency? Oh, and what about your cell phone? I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, a contributing editor at checkbook.org.
Welcome to Consumerpedia at checkbook.org. We're the nonprofit that helps consumers select services, avoid trouble, and save money. Because we don't accept any advertising or take money from any business we recommend, you can rely on checkbook.org to be completely independent and objective. Now, here's the host of Consumerpedia, America's consumer expert, the Consumer Man, Herb Weisbaum.
If you're traveling outside the U.S., you need to make sure your cell phone will work wherever you're headed. With a little advanced planning, you can also lower the cost of using your phone on that trip. In some cases, by $100 a line a week or more. We have two checkbook experts lined up to run down your money-saving options. We start with executive editor Kevin Brassler.
Hi, Herb.
So in most cases, our U.S.-based phones are going to work when we land in another country. The question is, how much do we want to pay to use them there?
Yeah, so when you travel outside the U.S., you leave behind the cellular networks maintained by AT&T and T-Mobile and Verizon. But because those major mobile companies have agreements with foreign networks, your phone will automatically switch to those foreign networks when you arrive. So, unless you have a very old phone or, some kind of unusual prepaid plan or with a handful of small resellers, your phone will work. I'll tell you, though, it sometimes takes a few minutes for that switchover. Whenever my flights land abroad, I just sit there and sweat out like 4 or 5 minute period of just panicking that my phone isn't going to connect. Often I have to turn it off and then on again before it will sense that I'm in, Europe or wherever, and it needs to find a different network, but it eventually does. So doing nothing, that's the most convenient way to stay connected. Customers of some resellers, Cricket, Straight Talk, TracFone, or Visible, for example, your phone just won't work outside the US, Canada, or Mexico because those companies have not set up these special arrangements with foreign carriers. But if you're with AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, Google Fi, or Xfinity, you should be good. So the first step, if you haven't traveled abroad with your current carrier, I would definitely call it to make sure you're good to go. Sometimes you have to do that. You have to authorize international connections before you leave. And also make sure that on your own phone that before you leave, you turn on international roaming capabilities. So if, again, you're not sure whether you've done that, call your carrier and ask. They should be able to walk through that with you.
So there's always a price to pay for convenience, and how much you pay depends on your cellular carrier. So what do the major carriers charge for this roaming service?
Yeah, so we check costs with the 3 largest U.S. carriers plus some major resellers. T-Mobile is by far the big winner here when it comes to international roaming costs. So much so that, I think if you travel often, I'd advise switching your business to them. What you'll pay with T-Mobile, it depends somewhat on which plan you have. For travel in Canada and Mexico, all its customers get free calling and texting, plus generous data allowances. In other foreign countries, you may pay some fees, but most of its customers, they get free high-speed data per day at no extra charge, and data is really the big driver on cost with international roaming. With many of its plans, you'll also pay nothing for texting. T-Mobile does charge some of its customers 25 cents a minute for calls when they're abroad. Again, it depends on your plan. But if you're with one of those plans and you can avoid long conversations, you're going to save a lot of money from using T-Mobile versus a lot of the other options.
So T-Mobile is the clear winner. Which company has the highest fees? I'm just going to take a wild guess. Verizon.
Yeah. It's Verizon in a landslide. The big problem with it is that by default, when its customers roam abroad, they get charged what they call pay-as-you-go fees. And those are astonishingly expensive. I mean, depending on the country, Verizon charges between 99 cents to $3 a minute for calls, up to 50 cents per text message, and up to $2 per megabyte for data. For most of Verizon's customers, a better choice to sign up for its optional travel pass. That costs still, though, $10 a day per line, $5 a day in Canada and Mexico. And that provides free calling, texting, and gives you some data allowances. If your trip is longer than 10 days, we advise you to sign up for Verizon's optional international monthly plan. That costs $100 a month per line. But again, you have to opt in to these flat rate plans with Verizon. If you don't, you might get charged huge fees. You might see the really big bill and it might be unexpected. But even if you take advantage of its flat rate plan, I mean, if you're a family of 4 and you each have a phone and you're with Verizon and you activate it abroad, you're going to pay $40 a day for everyone to stay connected. So I'm with Xfinity Mobile, which is a major reseller for Verizon. It has a similar fee structure. It's $10 a day per line. So when we travel abroad, I just tell my teenage daughters, I just make sure they're not authorized, their phones aren't authorized for international roaming, because that saves me $20 a day. And I mean, this makes them absolutely furious. And it's one reason that, pretty soon I think we're just going to switch over to T-Mobile.
If there's such a thing as reincarnation, make sure I never come back as one of your kids, okay? Because we would not get along. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, there is a way for them to stay connected. I mean, usually they can tether their phone to my phone and essentially use mine as a hotspot.
Okay. And you found that AT&T has somewhat similar fees to Verizon, but they're a bit more reasonable.
Yeah, a bit more. AT&T customers that are enrolled in its unlimited plans get free calling, texting, and data within Canada and Mexico. And then elsewhere, they're automatically charged for AT&T's International Day Pass program, which costs $10 a day for the first line and then $5 a day for each additional line. But even if you're not with one of its unlimited plans, you can easily sign up for its Day Pass. The other nice-ish thing about AT&T is it gives you a break if you're traveling with a family and you share an account. It caps your costs to a 10-day period. So within each billing cycle, if you've been abroad for 10 days, it's not going to charge you for the 11th and 12th and 13th day. And the way that Verizon and Xfinity just every day hit you with another 10-day charge if they sense that you're abroad. But I will say, if you're not with an AT&T plan and it doesn't automatically switch to its Day Pass thing, you definitely want to make sure to get it if you're going to use your phone at all. Because like Verizon, it charges pay-as-you-go rates that are just really expensive. And we're talking about $2 to $10 per megabyte for data. Those charges will really add up fast.
So what about the major resellers, companies like Boost Mobile and Consumer Cellular and Mint?
Yeah, so those 3 companies, they do have international roaming capabilities. For Boost, your phone has to be equipped with eSIM technology. We'll discuss that more in a minute. Mint and Boost, you prepay for these packages where you're buying up an allotment of data, and then if you need more, you sign up for more data. It's like you're buying buckets of credits to use while abroad. I think that, Mint overall, in terms of costs, it offers a pretty good deal for international travelers, but it is a hassle to have to continuously monitor your usage and add money to your account. So much so that I think that most international travelers probably want to pick a different option. Consumer Cellular is likely not a good option for most foreign travelers. It has, first of all, astonishingly opaque fees, and they vary by country. And I could even figure out what someone would pay for a trip to, say, France. What will I be charged while in Paris or in Marseille, or if I go to Versailles? I mean, the company's website provides no answers to these questions. And it's very disappointing given that this is the company that, primarily markets to older adults. Why not provide us with transparent pricing?
Right. Well, you've talked about data a lot. So I would assume that for most travelers, that's the thing to focus on, how much data you plan to use while you're away?
Yeah, really. I mean, unless you use your phone to talk a lot, and most people don't these days, it's data usage that's really going to drive up costs for most of us. Apps like Google Maps, I mean, those things can be real data hogs. If you're uploading pics and videos to social media, that'll quickly gobble up several megabytes of data. So before you leave, check your data caps. We found that cellular services, they like to throw around the term unlimited a lot, especially when it comes to data. But unlimited, surprise, it doesn't usually mean what it says. Xfinity, for example, for my $10 a day fee, it gives me 5 megabytes of data a day. If I go over that, and I often do because that's not much, I get switched over to its 2G service when abroad, and the industry refers to it as throttling. So I can still send and receive texts and calls, but now my phone becomes extremely slow to use for anything else at that point that I might want to do. So unless I have a Wi-Fi signal, I mean, even using navigation once I'm throttled to that 2G level is difficult. So it means I have to, really carefully monitor my own usage when I'm abroad and make sure my phone will still work by like the afternoon, it just becomes a frustrating experience, especially given that they promise you get unlimited data, the unlimited plan.
Well, there's a lot to think about there. That's why I always bring a bottle along with me. Just put a little note inside and throw it in the water. And if it gets back, it makes it. If not, it doesn't. It's a lot cheaper than using the cell phone. But, I'm an old guy. What can I tell you?
The good news is that for most of us, our phones are still going to work. The problem is what we found is often it requires some extra work to figure out what you're going to pay. And in this case, also how you can figure out what's the best deal. To sum it all up, the answer is T-Mobile, for the most part, offers the best deals when it comes to international travel.
Well, I wish you safe travel because I know you're always traveling. And to your two daughters, I feel really sorry for you. I really do.
If you like what you hear, we hope you'll consider being a Consumerpedia supporter by using the link at the bottom of the show notes to make a small contribution each month. This is Consumerpedia.
There are two ways to use your phone and avoid those expensive international roaming fees. Switch your phone service to a foreign wireless company when you arrive at your destination, or rely on Wi-Fi. Checkbook's Danny Dredger, Senior Manager of Digital Marketing, is here to explain how to do both of those things.
Hey Herb, how's it going?
Good, thank you. So let's start with switching to a wireless phone company in that country. So same phone, but different carrier providing the service. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And you can do this by either getting a new physical SIM card or by installing an eSIM. And that SIM is a small memory chip that stores the important data on your phone, like your phone number, and it also designates the network that you can connect to. So Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. You can get one of those SIM cards in the country or the region where you're traveling, and that will let you connect to the domestic network so your phone works just like it does at home. And in some cases, you can even get a local phone number. A lot of the newer phones have actually done away with the physical SIM cards, and they instead use something called an eSIM. It works the same way, except you install the package directly to your phone using a QR code. You just go under the settings on your phone and you select cellular or mobile network, and then you'll see an option right there to add an eSIM.
And are there things we need to do before we head off to make sure all this works?
I'm glad you asked, because I do want to make sure that everyone knows that regardless of if you're using a physical SIM card or an eSIM, your phone has to be unlocked for either of these technologies to work. And that doesn't just mean that the little tray will pop out that houses your SIM, or you get that success message after you download the eSIM. That means that you have permission to switch carriers. And I've heard from friends who bought their eSIM, downloaded it to their phone, thought they were ready to go, and then they landed in their destination and they realized, oh no, my phone is locked. This won't work. A reason that your phone could be locked is maybe you bought your phone from your carrier at a discounted rate, or you don't own your phone outright and you're still making monthly payments on top of your phone bill. Your US carrier isn't going to want you to then switch providers because you still owe them money. So if you have any questions about whether your phone is locked, you can call your carrier and check. You may have to pay them a small fee to unlock it, but definitely worth checking so that you don't have any hidden surprises when you get where you're going.
So if you're traveling for a long time, should you freeze your account with your U.S. carrier so you aren't paying for service you're not using?
Yeah, you can do this with AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon for up to 90 days. It's a good idea. That way you aren't paying for double coverage. Oh, and one other thing, Herb. If you get a new local phone number when you install the physical SIM card in your phone, and your phone doesn't have a dual SIM tray, so you have to actually take out your US SIM card, you're turning off your American phone number for the duration of your trip. So make sure you share your new phone number with your friends and family so they know how to get in touch with you, and they're not texting your US number and trying to get in touch with you and you're not getting those messages. But it's a good idea to download WhatsApp and use that to keep in touch, because if your friends and family back home are texting or calling with an international number, it could rack up their phone bill and then they won't be too happy with you when you get home.
So let's just be clear. If you change the SIM card, you won't be able to get the phone messages that might be on your voicemail or the text that people might have sent you through the U.S. carrier because you've disconnected that service.
That's right. You might get them when you put the SIM card back in your phone when you get home, but for the duration of your trip, if you have that SIM card for that country in your phone, you'll only get messages sent to that new local number.
So if I'm daring enough to try this, where do you buy a foreign SIM card or get that eSIM?
So you can buy an international SIM card before your trip, and that way you have it when you arrive, but you will find the best rates if you go to the carrier stores in the country where you're traveling. So I recommend not buying at the airport kiosks. You'll find better prices when you get into town, and this does mean that you'll have to do a little bit of work when you get there and a little extra work. But on the plus side, if you do go to a carrier's kiosk, they can help you get set up. They can probably also help you install that SIM card and make sure that everything's working before you head out on, whatever sightseeing you've got to do that day. For eSIMs, you can purchase those online and set them up in advance of your trip, and that way there's no friction when you land. And some of the popular brands that sell both the eSIM or the global or international SIM cards, those are Orange Travel, Air Allo, Allo SIM, SIM Options. When I was researching different SIM card options, I found the blog Too Many Adapters had really good advice and pricing for many different countries. So I would advise that you go look up your destination and see what they recommend.
Too many adapters. Okay. So if I'm going to different countries while I'm traveling outside the U.S., do I have to get a different SIM or eSIM for each one of those countries?
You don't. You could get a global or a regional SIM card, and that will work in multiple countries. So let's say you're doing a big European adventure. You can go through Orange Travel. We found a 14-day prepaid SIM, and that would have unlimited talk and text within Europe, 200 texts and 30 minutes of calls to other countries, and 8 gigabytes of data, and that's only $22. So it's big savings compared to just going through your carrier back home. The cool thing is that you won't be locked into a long-term commitment with any of these plans. A lot of the times it's just a prepaid package and it'll expire 2 weeks or a month after you buy it. You have the option to add more or top up if you go over what you purchased, and then you just get rid of that SIM card at the end of your trip and buy a new one the next time you travel. Note that most global or regional packages are data only, so that means you won't get a local phone number, and you'll have to use those Wi-Fi friendly apps like WhatsApp or Viber or even Facebook Messenger. I'll talk a little bit more about those when we get to the Wi-Fi portion of this, but you can use those to keep in touch with your friends. You can call them, you can text with them. If that is a deal breaker, if you want to have a phone number and keep in touch with your family that way, then I would recommend that you stick with the physical local SIM card. But just check with your destination before you leave for your trip. There are some countries that require a passport to authorize SIM purchases. And in other countries like Japan, it's illegal to have a local phone number if you don't have a residence there. So if you were traveling to Japan, you could only get a data package for a SIM or an eSIM.
Wow, who knew? So for people who are all thumbs, your host is one of them, how difficult is it to remove a SIM card and replace it with another?
Herb, in theory, it shouldn't be that hard. You just have this little device that kind of looks like a paperclip. It's called a SIM needle, and you can use that to pop out the tray and trade your SIM cards. But I have heard from consumers who have broken their phones, like flat out broken their phones trying to get the SIM open. So for me too, I wouldn't make that risk. I don't want to ruin my trip by not having a functioning phone, or worst case, when I get home, I have to buy a whole new phone. I personally would not go with a SIM card. eSIMs, you can just download that directly to your phone. If your phone is new enough to have that technology, that is a lot less risk for human error. Let's just put it that way.
But paperclip, toothpick, fingernails, knitting needle, that's not the way to do it.
No. So yeah, make sure you pack that SIM needle, or like I said earlier, if you go to the kiosk for a carrier when you get there, hopefully they have one in store and they can help you install it.
Now, there is one more way to go. Turn off the cell service and rely on Wi-Fi. And Danny explains how that works next. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, and you're listening to Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
Consumerpedia Fast Facts. Think smartphone, and you probably think Steve Jobs. But according to Ring Central, the world's first smartphone, named Simon, was created by IBM. It went on sale in 1994. Simon was a bulky device that had a touch screen, could do email, and had a few built-in apps, including a calculator. The first text message was sent in 1992. It said, "Merry Christmas." And this may surprise you. The original phone greeting wasn't hello. Alexander Graham Bell preferred ahoy hoy, the popular nautical greeting. It was Thomas Edison who suggested hello.
All right, option number 3, which will eliminate all foreign roaming fees, is to turn off your cell service and use Wi-Fi. Danny, how do we do that?
So I'm sure you figured out by now, but you can do pretty much everything that you need to on your phone with just data if you do a little prep and download some apps. So I mentioned WhatsApp. That's a really good one for texting and calling. And outside the US, a lot of people use this instead of the native calling and texting apps on their phones. I've used it to check in with Airbnb hosts and guides. If you have an iPhone, you'll also be able to send and receive iMessages or texts just like you normally do to other iPhone users. You can also use FaceTime to make calls and a few other apps that work with data. You've got Facebook Messenger, Google Hangouts, Discord, Viber, Signal, Skype, and Zoom. All of those have messaging and calls with data.
Danny, as you know, I'm not quite as technically savvy as you are, but when I went to London last year to visit my cousin, that's all they use over there is WhatsApp. And we set it up and he could send me messages, he could call, he sends me video, and it's really easy and it works like a charm. So I recommend if you're over there, you might want to do that because that's what a lot of people over there are using to begin with.
Absolutely. Like I was running late and I was trying to check in to my Airbnb in Italy and my host was able to call me and I was able to tell her, my train just pulled into the station. I'll meet you there very soon. Sorry for the delay. But yeah, it's super helpful to communicate with people.
One thing that concerns me is Wi-Fi can be spotty in so many places. Seems like a risky way to go.
That's absolutely true. It can be really frustrating relying on free Wi-Fi networks, especially as you get further out of city center. I recommend downloading offline maps on Google or Apple Maps so that way you can keep navigating. Your phone will still ping satellites and obtain your GPS info so you can keep working with the map even if you are off Wi-Fi. But if that sounds too risky to you and you don't like that idea of being disconnected if you're not in a cafe on free Wi-Fi or at your hotel, you can always rent a portable Wi-Fi device and carry that around, and that way you're always connected.
So you've done this. Did it work? And are there any tricks that make it easier to stay in touch with folks back home doing it this way?
For the most part, it does work. I've done this on pretty much every international trip I've taken over the last few years. And one of the best things about it is it costs only $7 to $15 a day for unlimited data, and you can connect multiple devices to it. So instead of shelling out $10 per line per phone, you can connect all of your phones to that one device. And that way you're saving a ton of money. Just search Wi-Fi pod in the region where you're traveling and you can compare your options. I've picked up mine through a car rental agency at the same time as a car. I've also had the pod mailed to the first hotel on my trip and I picked it up at check-in, and then you can just mail it back with the prepaid envelope. Like I said, a couple of things I recommend. Download those apps that I listed. They'll help you stay connected. And also bring a portable charger around with you. The Wi-Fi pods usually last 6 to 8 hours, so if you're out and about all day, you'll want to make sure it's recharged, and that way you're always connected. Do keep in mind that even though they have unlimited data, most companies will probably start to throttle your speed if you go over 5 gigabytes per day, multiple days in a row. So I wouldn't recommend trying to stream your favorite show while you're traveling. Just use it for maps, for texting and keeping in touch with everyone, or for calls.
How big or how heavy is this pod? I mean, is it just a little tiny thing that's no hassle to carry around with you all day?
Yeah, it fits in the palm of your hand. Like I'll usually keep it in my purse and I'll have a small portable charger connected to it and I'll keep it in my bag. And that way my husband and I, as long as we're staying together, we can both connect to it and both navigate and keep in touch. The only downside really is if you're with a bigger group of people and you're planning to split up and you only have that one Wi-Fi pod, well, as soon as someone gets out of range, they're not going to be able to connect to it. So sometimes a mixed approach, like maybe one person, they'll go through their plan back home and they'll do that $10 a day aligned thing, and you can get a Wi-Fi pod as well, and that way if the group decides to split up, well, the people with the Wi-Fi pod, they can text that one friend who has cell service and you can communicate that way. But if it's a small group or if you're just traveling with one other person, you can get a lot of savings if you rent the Wi-Fi pod.
All right, I'm a little dense. If there's no real good Wi-Fi in the area, how does this Wi-Fi pod make a connection and get me the service I need?
So think of it like the modem in your home. That creates the Wi-Fi network that you would use in your home to connect your phone, all your devices to. Now shrink that down to size so that it fits in the palm of your hand. That's what you're using with the Wi-Fi pod. So when I was traveling in Europe this summer, the pod that I rented connected to the Vodafone network towers, and it would create a connection that way. And so then I would go on my phone and I would look for the available Wi-Fi networks. I would see the one that I had rented and I'd connect to that, and that was connecting to all the Vodafone towers. So that's how I was able to have Wi-Fi all day while I was out and about. It was like holding a modem in the palm of my hand.
So it's not relying on the Wi-Fi that's in the hotel or whatever. It's relying on the cell tower that's near you to get you the service you need.
Absolutely. Yep.
So if there's no cell phone service, if you're going in the middle of the jungle, you may be out of luck, but as long as there's cell phone service you're using, you're going to be okay.
Right. So you still might have some connectivity issues that you were if you had a phone plan instead of just data. But if you're in a city and you're wandering around, you should have really good connection. You may expect a little bit of some connectivity issues the further out you get. Like if you were doing an African safari, I probably would not recommend that you do this. But if you are planning to visit a bunch of major cities and you know that they have good connectivity, this should work fine.
And you've done it and it works.
Oh yeah, it's great. I've done it in Europe. I did it in Asia. It's really fantastic.
Well, great. Well, Danny, you packed a lot of technical stuff into this episode, but luckily for all of us, you wrote a story all about this that details all the steps you need to take for all three options. You will find it, of course, at checkbook.org. Thank you, Danny, and looking forward to your next trip somewhere.
Thanks, Herb.
Well, that's it for this edition of Consumerpedia. We hope you'll rate this episode and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Remember, we release new episodes every other Thursday. Another way you can support this show is to follow us on Consumerpedia on Facebook and Instagram, and at My Consumerpedia on Twitter. I'm Herb Weisbaum. Thanks for listening.
Consumerpedia is a public service of checkbook.org. We're a unique nonprofit that helps you save money and make smarter choices. You can count on Checkbook to help you find the best services and avoid the worst, with local ratings that are accurate and unbiased. If you live in or around these 7 cities and haven't joined Checkbook yet, check us out. Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle, San Francisco, Minneapolis-St. Paul, and Washington, D.C. To get your free 30-day subscription, go to checkbook.org/consumerpedia. If you like what you've heard, we hope you'll become a supporter by using the link at the bottom of the show notes to make a small contribution each month. Consumerpedia, empowering consumers to save money and make smarter choices.